بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Jazakumullah khair for joining us for our third episode of Raising the Bar podcast. I have our brother Dean Mousad joining us. Jazakumullah khair for making time. And it's pretty late when we're recording this, so do bear that in mind as we go through some of these conversations. I was actually pleasantly surprised. Before each podcast, I typically catch up with the guests and like we do a warm-up, if you will. And I wish I had recorded it because then we wouldn't have had to film this. But I was very pleasantly surprised by how Brother Dean carries himself, and it will show hopefully as we go through this conversation. So I guess in terms of intentions, today we're seeking to talk a little bit about brothers in need. Second area would be community development, and thirdly, Dean's role as a school counselor, depending on how much time we have, I guess. Where Ramadan is upon us, so a lot of people will be considering where to give their zakat and their sadaqah this blessed month. And one of the objectives of this podcast is also to raise education amongst donors, so they actually know who they're donating to, etc., as well as being able to have direct conversations with the heads of organizations such as Dean. So we're going to go through all the questions, especially the anonymous ones, which are a bit harsh, perhaps, but Dean's a champion, so we'll be going through those as well. So we'll start off with a couple of rapid questions. We're not going to go through the whole thing just to save some time. So the two that we'll go through is, firstly, what's your favorite charity other than your own?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Thank you for having me. Allah barik feek. There's more qualified people than myself to be here, so thank you for having me on board. Going straight into your question, what's the favorite charity of mine? If I'm to be fair, I'll do a local and a international. So Ismail Davids from National Zakat Foundation. He's been doing some great work in the space for the last 10 years. I do a lot of shura with him. I look up to him. So he's someone that, mashallah, I like his charity, fight for his charity. I donate to his charity, right? In terms of the international work, Sadaqah Welfare Fund. So we've done some work with them over the years. I've worked with Bullant a long time ago. So I know Bullant, Josh, and the work that they do. So they're another charity that has been doing some great work over the years, and they're my international charity of choice.
Yep. So Ismail, we've interviewed. Inshallah, everyone that hasn't watched that episode, maybe go back to that one. And inshallah, I do intend to, if we get the opportunity, to also speak to the brothers from Sadaqah Welfare Fund, inshallah. The other rapid question would be your favorite ayah or hadith. So I think you mentioned it to me before.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So I guess depending on the time, the day, the week, the month, it changes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Insan, I believe, one of the verses is لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا, which is, for me, I think it's important because the work that we do, sometimes people might do it for different reasons, different intentions. Might do it for worldly gain, financial gain, for a seat, right? Being the managing director, CEO, whatever. For me, inshallah, I'd like to think that I don't do it for that, and I don't want worldly benefit. I don't want the pat on the back, the well done, good work, mate. You're doing great. I don't want any of that. I want pure recognition from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me at this point in my life, this verse resonates well with me alongside the other verses that are in those, in that order.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very important, that when we have any conversation, we have to have it in goodwill. So it's not about point scoring. It's not about gotcha moments. It's more so about getting to the crux of discussions and having those difficult discussions in a mature way, which we'll try to do today as well. So we'll go into the first section of major questions, which are centered around brothers in need. So the first one is a open question. So tell us a little bit about brothers in need. What's your elevator pitch to Muslims, and why should they donate to brothers in need?
Good question. So a bit about brothers in need. We started back in 2015. The co-founders, the four of us, why we set it up is because at that point in time, not long before that, we had lived a life of sin and going against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger wanted. And we didn't find at that point in time any organizations that provided a safe space and a medium for people to do khair. So going back 2015 or just before, there were a lot of masajid around as there are today, although there wasn't much movement happening in them. Okay, right? So it's just a place of worship, prayer five, living the lifestyle that we lived, going into these masajid. We felt like we'd be judged. People would look at us, look at these guys that had just done X, Y, Z before, they're coming into the masjid now. And so we wanted to create a safe space at that point in time for people to transition out of whatever lifestyle they had lived and coming closer to Allah. This is a medium to the masajid, to circles of knowledge and classes and the like. Since then, alhamdulillah, we've evolved. We've got an office in New South Wales, Brisbane, and recently Melbourne. And we provide services for the local community, whether it's running soup kitchens, homeless outreach programs, youth programs. We've got a lot of schools that join us on our programs, nursing home visits, respite center visits, looking after people with different abilities. I find that, mashallah, there are a lot of services in the community that exist, although I haven't come across one that does this locally. So there's a lot of collect funds, donate them predominantly internationally towards infrastructure like water wells, masajid, orphanages. Although when it comes to human resource, I feel like we don't capitalize enough on humans donating their time.
Okay.
And so I think Brothers in Need has a niche in that, and it allows people that do want to give back their time, right, and feel different feelings, and gratitude and the like. It's easy to take a bus, carpool to Martin Place than it is to jump on a plane on the other side of the world and do it.
Okay, so it's about localizing it. It's about maybe filling a void that you felt was empty. And I think like the reason that I structure the questions in this way as well is that when you know the Genesis story, you actually understand where people are coming from, perhaps the gap that they see in the community, and there's many gaps that still exist and need filling, and it's about understanding that, I guess. So the next question is linked to the origin story. So most people, when they think of Brothers in Need, they think about Martin Place. They think about people going out, feeding people that are homeless, on doing it tough on the streets. And there are some local charities that you were working with in the early days. We won't name any, but some people allege certain things about these particular charities. Do you mind like clearing the air and putting on record, I guess, the relationship you had with these charities? What happened to them? What happened to their funds? What happened? What were the allegations? Or you don't need to go into detail, but like, I guess, what's your perspective on the whole thing?
We're starting off hot, the conversation. So,
well, we're warmed up now. It's actually very hot in.
It is. I don't know to the left. The way I like to look at it is, we've all got shortcomings, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to conceal ours. Some of our shortcomings may not have been exposed, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to never expose those shortcomings. Some of other organizations, other individuals may have been, right? I think maybe the charity that you're referring to, they were running very similar programs to us at that point in time when they started out in December 2014. So they started 3 months before us. We started in March 2015. At that point in time, there weren't many organizations feeding members of the homeless community. They were feeding members of the homeless community as well. We were two separate non-for-profits, right? So we were out in Martin Place. I believe they were out in Glebe and other parts of the city. And so people would say, why are you duplicating service for? Right? And so for us, we didn't see it as duplicating service, because when we'd speak to them, we'd find out where they were, what days, locations, and times, and we'd make sure that we weren't at the same place.
Okay.
So we've made sure as best as we can until today with the different service partners that we work with that we don't duplicate resources. Why their status was revoked, I believe that the peak regulatory body, the ACNC, had made contact with them. There were a few concerns that they had in terms of, if you want to say, finances or management of those finances, the certain responsible people, policies and procedures. From what I understand, they were given multiple attempts to answer those queries unsuccessfully. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do so. And so the ACNC revoked their status back in 2016. So we're in 2023 now, so along 7 years. A lot's happened. So I think hopefully that...
So some people will want to know, like say you worked with someone, and they go under, for example. How is that impacting you, or does that impact your reputation at all? Or how, what do you think about that? People that might question that.
All success belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And I think the proof is in the pudding of the organization, right? So if we look at since 2017 when they went under, 2016 when they went under till now, I'd say look at the organization, right? It had an office only back then in New South Wales. Now it's got one in Queensland and Melbourne. Look at the volunteers. Maybe back then they only had 50. As of the last count, they've had over 575 in those states. If you want to look at the financial metrics, ET on the ACNC website, you can see on their financial report section that they've grown. So I think people need to dig a bit deeper under the surface and do their research and look at different metrics that are available and then track that organization.
That's right, yeah. So I think donors, need to be very conscious about the process of donating. A lot of people think that charities form an outsourcing service where you just chuck money on the 27th night and that's it for the whole year. I think people need to actually know, for example, just like if you're investing in a company, you need to know what does the company do. If you don't understand it, you shouldn't be investing in it. Similarly, you should know the people that are running the charity. Are these reputable people? Have they been around for years? What do other people that are in that area of service, what do they say about them and whatnot? So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I think the existence of bad charities or bad behaviors in any industry doesn't discredit the entire industry. Well, definitely, some people may fall into that mistake of making. The other question is, and I think you touched upon this, but I want to go deeper. Why should Muslims keep their donations local? So many people say that, unlike other countries, so we see what's happening in Turkey or the floods in Pakistan or other crises that are happening. Australia has Centrelink. Australia has a strong economy where there's many job opportunities. How does the difficulty of what you see with homelessness and other related issues, how does that compare to those issues, and why should we then keep our money locally and not send it overseas?
I think in terms of framing it the way it's being framed, I don't think the community should compare, because you can't compare, right? Yeah. Obviously, if we're going to compare our situation to third world countries, I think it goes hands down whether you're comparing Australia to Africa, to the Middle East, what's happened recently in Turkey and Syria and the region. You can't compare the hardships that they're going through. Although does that mean that because they're going through a tougher hardship, we're not going through a hardship at all? So look at it as a spectrum, right? And so depending on where we are on the spectrum, some people might go through harder hardships and, some maybe not as much. So I think the way I like to look at it is just like we would with investments, like you suggested. We're taught to diversify. We're taught to put, some money in this stock, in this option, in this business, and what have you. And so what I would say is do the same. So how that individual, how that family decides to diversify, whether they decide to do 80-20, 50-50, 70-30, right? 60-20-20, whatever.
Yep.
Break it down as you see fit, right? So do your consultation, do your shorter, ask the people, that are in the same space, what do you think of this charity? Look online. If they're a registered charity, you'll find the details.
What would you say, for example, people say that, okay, we've got Centrelink or we've got jobs.
Yep.
What do you, more specifically, what would you say about those particular responses?
Yeah. So I told them to dig a bit deeper, right? So these blanket statements might get us out of donating altogether. We might say to a person that promotes a local cause, oh, brother, there's no need for it because Centrelink's here. But then that person may never donate at all. Just saying to that charity or insinuating that I donate internationally, I won't donate to you because there's no need for it, right? I'd say dig a bit deeper, and like we did before the podcast, right? We talked about, an income, right, of an individual that works hard. So say, for example, you're a hard worker, you earn 2.5 grand a week after tax. Doesn't happen with a lot of households, but let's just say you've got your own business and you do own that. We've seen in Australia in recent times the rise of interest rates, right? We've seen inflation. We've seen living in Australia, high cost of living, right? So for someone who works, who's capable, who's able, who hasn't been touched with any, affliction or calamity, they struggle, right, with a $700 a week rent, with $300, $400, $500 a week groceries, with Wi-Fi, with phone bills, with petrol, with. So when someone jumps on Centrelink and they're not getting that $2,000 a week, they're getting perhaps $1,200 a fortnight, and that's maybe for a single mom with a child, she'll be earning something like that. Maybe even if the child has a different ability, right, they'll earn that higher amount. What's $1,200 a fortnight going to do? Like, how much do you pay a week? Just rent.
It's an awkward question because I live with my parents.
Okay.
But
how much would you pay? Or they
let's just say, look, the house that I'm living in, like market rate, it could be something like maybe $500, $600 a week.
So $500-$600 a week. There's already your $1,200, $1,000 to $1,200 a fortnight. So someone on Centrelink, what about their other expenses? What about the food that they're going to put in their child's lunchbox? What about the phone bills? What about the Wi-Fi? What about? So I think we can see with just that quick exercise that Centrelink, as good of a safety net as it is, it just doesn't cover your complete life expenses.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't even started talking about entertainment or going out or holidays or savings. It's just the basic rent, food, bills to survive.
Because I think, I think the way you framed it was good, because I don't think it should be local versus global, local or global. It's more of a spectrum, not a dichotomy.
Yeah.
So it's more like, okay, my personal view might be, I don't know, you might be sitting there and being like, okay, there's huge global issues happening. I'm going to be 90-10. I'm going to send 90% globally, and I'm going to go put 10% locally. So there's just different ways of diversifying. But I guess you'd be a strong proponent of the idea that some proportion has to be local.
Most definitely, right? And we haven't even dissected into the Islamic rulings. I think Ismail David has done many videos about this in terms of the zakat and how it should be distributed, who it should be collected from, who it should be distributed to. Yeah, there might be difference of opinion depending on the need and the context on where to send.
Mm-hmm.
Although, once again, framing it the way we did before, don't just look at it as I'm going to give 100% to NZF or brothers in need, nothing globally. Look at, okay, what's the need? And then distribute according to the need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that way then you get some orphanages, you get some water wells, you get some sadaqah locally, you get some, awesome zakat distributed, Qurban locally, whatever the case is. And on the Day of Judgment, you see that portfolio yield for you, inshallah.
I like the words that you use. But yeah, like I think like when we're trying to like raise the bar of conversation, we need to move beyond dichotomies and see things like this, I guess. I guess along the side of that, I think one thing even recently I noticed that Brothers in Need also partners with other charities, including global charities. So I think with the recent earthquakes, he partnered up with the Brothers from Sadaqah Welfare Fund. This might sound like a stupid question, but what's the difference between someone, say, donating to you for the Turkey appeal and donating to Sadaqah Welfare Fund? Why would they donate to you to then give a check to Sadaqah Welfare Fund instead of just donating directly?
That's a good question. So it just depends on the individual. Some individuals will donate directly. So if we put out a message online or through our WhatsApp groups or what have you, we might put a link to their website, to their banking details. If we've got a unique relationship with some of these charities, they might want to see how much money comes in through us as a service partner. So it's easier for them to track that, as opposed to saying, oh, so-and-so, Shabazz donated $1,000. So-and-so donated. This person donated because they messaged me saying that they're going to donate. So sometimes when you've got long-term relationships or partnerships, it might be a matter of, okay, how much money came in from your networks, right? Sometimes it could be a matter of convenience and ease. Those donors that donate to Brothers in Need regularly. They've already got our details on hand. So it's just a matter of donating directly to that cause. Both organizations have tax-deductible status, but some charities don't. So if they were to donate directly to them, so a lot of Mousad don't have a DGR status. So you look at like your bigger players like MATW recently that might be partnering up with a lot of Mousad fundraisers. They might do so to give the donor a tax-deductible receipt.
That's right.
For example.
So I think, and these are some good points that I think, to use these more difficult words, when people are in the boxing ring, they sort of see it from a particular view. And there's some like operational details that are important. And I think the example of the DGR status, why, say MATW with Glenhaven Masjid or Hurstville Masjid, there was also say Islamic Relief with a Nawawi Center and some of the other mosques that are fundraising. It's those partnerships that are really important, because you can have unity and work together and unite upon good without necessarily being one organization. And I think it's those mature organizations that build these networks of partners. I know you work with NZF as a partner and other charities, is just complementing each other's specializations.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty good as well. Speaking of partnerships, like, do you mind talking through some of the partnerships that you have in the local Muslim community and the broader non-Muslim community?
Yeah.
So I think many charities might just work within the community, but I think looking at your socials, I think that you've worked with Microsoft, you worked with some other non-Muslim businesses and organizations. So do you mind talking about that? And like the so what of it? Like, is it like, what da'wah does it create? What opportunities does it create? What conversations does it start? Do you mind talking through that?
Yeah. So I guess we've got different streams of volunteers, if we would like to put it. So we've got schools, right? We always complain about our youth. We've got nothing for our youth. We've got nothing for our youth. We've got nothing for our youth.
Yep.
So schools, join us on all of our programs that we mentioned earlier on. You've got your normal volunteers that will jump on the website, register to be a volunteer, and they'd also volunteer on our programs.
Mm-hmm.
And then in recent times, maybe in the last 12 months, we've had corporates. So Microsoft, Salesforce, Combank, blah, 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 Piety Group, and what have you. They're probably the 4 recent corporates that have joined us. A mix of Muslim and non-Muslim corporate companies and also employees. So they also have employees who are Muslims and non-Muslims. So what's generally happened with all 4 of those corporates, there's been Muslim individuals that I know that work for these corporates that say, hey, Dean, they've got a CSR program. They want to do some good work. They get either A, hours per year paid for, and they need to volunteer, or B, they got match grants, giving grants, funds to donate to different good causes. And so for us, the volunteers and those individuals initiate those partnerships with us, and then A, they either volunteer their time, or B, they donate wealth, or C, a mixture of both. I guess the competitive advantage that we might have working with names like them that are known, we get recognition, if you'd like, right, from the wider community. So they might see, okay, these bigger corporates are partnering up with a small org. So maybe they see something in them, which is great when we reach out to other corporates, ask for donors. It's good dawah. So a lot of these individuals may not have dealt with a Muslim organization before. So we've got an iftar coming up, and we've invited these corporate companies. We've given them a table each at our iftar. So some of these individuals, they've never heard of Ramadan. They've never broken fast with a Muslim. They've never shared a meal, like they say. So they'll be able to watch Muslims pray Taraweeh, hear the call to prayer, eat. It's building a connection, building rapport. If we look at the message of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his message was to instill tawheed, save people from hellfire, teach people about Allah. And so we'd like to think as an organization that inshallah follows in those footsteps. This is what we're doing in a wise way, subtle way, what have you way. So that's, I think, why we've given some time to corporates in the last 12 months. Then you get the basic perks, right? So Microsoft donated, they donated an Xbox, Harvey Norman donated a TV, Microsoft donated a laptop to us, alongside every year, each employee gets $9,000 as a donation matching from Microsoft. So if the employee donates $2,000 a year, Microsoft will match that.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Right. So if that team has 60 volunteers, each one donates $1,000 each. Microsoft now will give an extra $60,000
Oh, okay.
to Brothers in Need on top of the 60 that those employees have donated to us. So there's a lot of advantages partnering up.
I think this is really good because like I think inevitably there's a lot of partnerships that we can build that grow us as a community. And I think the examples that you've given are very impressive titles, I guess. Say I'm sitting here as the CEO of another charity and I'm green with envy with some of those things that you've just said. Do you come across, when you interact with other leaders in the charity sphere, do you see when you're doing well, they're happy for you, or is it competition? Like, there's obviously the praiseworthy competition where you're trying to outdo each other in good deeds, without wanting any harm for the other person.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you have more like a cutthroat type of competition.
Yeah.
How would you describe the sector, I guess, like when you interact with other charities or maybe experiences that you've had? Obviously, we're not going to air dirty laundry by naming names or anything, but like, how would you describe the charity sphere?
Look, I think the way I'll answer this question is, for me, I try as best as I can to lead by example, right? So if I sit here and worry about what other people perceive me to be or what they hope for, do they hope for Brothers in Need's demise, my demise, what have you? I think Mufti Menk put it one time in a video that I watched years ago. He said, if I'm going to sit here and watch people and focus on the negativity and be a negative person myself, what time am I going to have for positivity? So if I'm going to focus on the negative, then I'm not really going to have any time for the positive. I'm not going to have any time to do khair or do anything of the like. So I think when I frame it that way, I know for a fact if any charity, any individual asks us for advice and support, we do so. So, say for example, a new project, the rehabilitation project, who run out of our centre in Punchbowl. In the beginning when they first started, they went through the DGR process and all of that jazz. Alhamdulillah, we were able to support them in the process. So connecting them up with a solicitor, helping pay for their DGR process, give them a space to use, at our premises. And that's just one way that we've supported those who actually want help, want advice, want to learn from one's experience and one's mistakes, right? So I think for any charity, any new charity, any organization or individual, if you need support, I'm happy to give it. It just makes sense because, like we were talking about before, victory isn't going to come on my hands, right? Victory isn't going to be given to Dean, Mousad, or it's not going to be given to Brothers in Need. We're going to be, the flag bearers. It's not going to happen, right? It's going to come to the Jama'ah. And so the way I look at it is we're just a vehicle. We're just a vehicle amongst vehicles. And collectively, inshallah, all of those vehicles together, the Jama'ah, will get that victory. So I think we need to look at it in that respect.
I think like beforehand, we were talking about the analogy of a puzzle. So each of the pieces are different. Some of them connect with other pieces, some of them don't.
Yeah.
But collectively, when you put them all together, that's when you sort of have the whole picture.
Yeah.
So I think not conflating your piece of the puzzle as the puzzle itself, as some people may do, is important. Like I think you answered that question very diplomatically. So you didn't really answer it. But like, have there been instances where you feel that certain charities, perhaps due to their size, due to their history, due to whatever reason they think that they have one up on everyone else, does it happen? Like surely it's not all we hold hands and sing around a campfire or something. Like there must be some stuff.
There is. There is definitely that. There is that sometimes sense of, I've been around for 10, 20, 30 years. Who are you to step in? Who are you to ask me to partner up with me? Who are you to X, Y, Z? Whether it's directly, whether it's indirectly. sometimes you'll call out for help to certain organizations. And once again, I think action speaks louder than words. So, for example, we've gone through an AC&C audit a couple of years ago. We went through an ATO audit last year. Alhamdulillah, we went through them with flying colors, submitted a 20-page response for both of those audits, and getting a finalization letter saying good to go from our end, right? There were certain charities and individuals that we reached out to that responded to us straight away, supported us, helped us create that response. Some played the, oh brother, sorry, I don't have time, I'd love to help you, we don't have the resources, and didn't provide another workaround. So for me, let's just say you don't have a solution, okay, and what else? Does somebody in your networks, can they help me? Do they have the knowledge? I don't know if there's still another roundabout answer to your question.
No. I think you touched upon it. So basically, like the way I'd see it is that again, like I've got limited experience with the community as well. Maybe I've seen a certain side of it as well, but I do think that increasingly you'll know people through their actions. So you look at the track record of organizations, and you'll see patterns of behavior. Those patterns of behavior are easy to identify. When you see certain people opening their doors and welcoming other organizations, even if they may be perceived as a competitor, etc., you can notice that, I think, and that it's just interesting, I guess. Like again, we're avoiding names, so it's a very difficult conversation to have as well. Just before we move on, I guess, just on this partnership aspect, there's also a charity called Sisters in Need. So do you mind? Is there a link? Is it just a name or?
So this did exist pre-COVID, and it was just a name. So I think it was just a Facebook page that we created at the time. At the time, maybe even just a touch before COVID, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot more, quote unquote, more conservative volunteers that we had at that time. So we attracted more of a conservative bunch, right? And so they wanted segregation at every point and turn. And so that, alongside, going back to a question you're asking before, there were rumors of other charity partners that were engaged in a lot of misconduct. And so we wanted to separate our name from those other organizations. So it was twofold. Number one, when we created the Sisters in Need, people knew that sisters were responding to sisters, and sisters were dealing with sisters and creating programs for sisters, so that people knew that it wasn't us engaging in that misconduct. Mm-hmm. And number two, to our conservative database, who didn't want a male admin responding to a female request for a volunteer or what have you, we created that. Although we found at that point in time, after a period of time of going down that route, it wasn't productive, it wasn't efficient. And we had different databases of volunteers start flowing on through. Okay, so we just thought it would be smarter to centralize everything instead of going down the route of registering it as a entity, creating separate, AC&C registration, duplicating resources like we talked about before. Mm-hmm. It just made sense to educate the community about what we were doing and how we were doing it, and just teaching them that it was inefficient. Okay. And so this process now is just centralized.
So do you think that like how do you guys manage now? So like every Muslim organization I speak to, a big challenge or elephant in the room is the issue of gender interaction. There's many instances where it goes wrong.
Yep.
And how do you navigate that that labyrinth?
I think it comes down to a few factors. I think number one, is it done with a purpose? So for us, it's done with a purpose, right? I'll say, for example, maybe working in this boutique firm that you're a part of, right? You'll have male and female employees, right? When someone goes to purchase food from Woolworths or Coles, right? That I say, oh, sorry, sister, I can't deal with you because you're a non-Muslim or because you're a female, right? So it might be with a purpose, there might be etiquettes, there might be a way to deal with someone from the opposite gender. There isn't any fairy floss and fluffy stuff, right? It's very Islamically focused. I think one of the mashayikh explained it to me in a way where I think Surah Al-Qasas, the story of Musa alayhi salam when he interacted with the females, when he had left and fled Egypt, went to Madian, I believe it was. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us in the Quran and how he interacted with the females and then how they interacted back with him, I think with istihya. So they interacted with him with shyness, and then, to the, following few verses, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a framework in terms of how to deal perhaps with the opposite gender. If it's done with a purpose, it's done with certain guidelines, inshallah. Then, Bismillah ta'ala, we hope that what we're doing is okay. We do understand that some people still don't want to engage in that, maybe out of wara, maybe out of not wanting to put themselves at risk of potentially something going down the track going wrong. And so we do have some programs that are only for males. We do have some programs for females. And we've got some programs for both in a respectful Islamic way.
Yeah, and I think we'll come to this later because, like, as a service provider for a mass community, you've got all sides of the spectrum in terms of views. It's a very difficult situation to sort of try to cater for people. Inevitably, you can't appease everyone, but having options for people so people can opt into, okay, I follow this particular view, therefore I'm going to go to the brothers only one. Or I might not necessarily, someone else might not care about that, so they'll be just like, okay, whatever. So I think because I've noticed as well, like you've maintained a large proportion of your more traditionally minded donor base. You haven't put them offside by swinging the pendulum to the opposite direction or anything like that. Taking one step back about like the conversation we have about like duplication of work and the fact that you absorb sisters in need, sticking into brothers in need. There are many charities that do similar work, and some suggest something like, oh, you work with NZF, why don't you just merge with NZF?
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, how would you respond to that?
Yeah. So I can play devil's advocate and ask which other services do the work that we do, right? Personally, I haven't come across many organizations that do the exact same work that we do in terms of the outreach programs that we provide. There are local organizations like NZF, like House of Sadaqah, that serve a different need in the community. So House of Sadaqah might have different bins around where people can donate their clothes. They might have op shops where people can donate their newer clothes to those op shops and they can sell them. They send some clothes overseas. NZF predominantly collects zakat and distributes it, right? It doesn't really do the outreach programs. It doesn't really have a strong volunteer base where they activate them to visit the sick, visit the elderly, visit people with different abilities. So what I would say is the partnerships that we have already in place, inshallah, is a means of showcasing that we don't want to duplicate the work, even though we might work in the same country or the same state. Although there are different needs in the community and we're just trying to fill those needs accordingly. Where there's room for synergy collaboration, then we try as best as we can to do so.
Yeah, so I think, like, again, to use like a business analogy, you have the economy and everyone's like specializing in a particular niche. No one sort of goes end to end, typically speaking. So I think I think like your partnership with NZF is in like this, what would you describe? Like a hierarchy or like a structure of, okay, money donated comes here, and then the partners are doing the work. I think because if you think about it, as a charity, you could sit there and say, okay, I'm going to collect the money and then I'm going to do all these programs. But when you have people already doing those programs, you just become a conjugate between the donor and the programs. And I think that's a good thing to consider. Another sort of question, like to shift it towards like finances. Some people believe that 100% of donations should go to recipients. And you're smiling up to the second bottle as well. Is this sustainable or even possible? How does Brothers in Need offset admin costs, for example?
So I think you've answered the question, right? So some charities will market that they're 100% donation policy, 0% admin. Obviously, like you just suggested, they offset that with another pool of funds, right? So there's another pool of funds. Traditionally, generally speaking, it might be there are some donors in the community that believe in covering those costs. Example, we're sending hundreds of tons of flour and potatoes overseas. Those hundreds of tons need trucks. They need petrol. They need workers.
They need a driver.
They need a driver. They don't just appear. They don't just cross the border themselves, the potatoes, right, or the flour, and somehow magically appear in the bakery. So there's admin, right, on a very simple level. But there are generous donors that understand that for this to get where it needs to, we need to cover those expenses. And so I think, I'm not going to say it's deceptive. What I'm going to say is, I think in terms of the way we market, we need to explain to the donor that there is admin, although this admin is covered by generous corporates, individuals, families, and, donors.
So if I gave you $100,
Yep.
how much of that $100 goes to the recipients, the homeless person, the hungry person, etc.?
Yeah. So at the moment, we've been working on a 10% admin fee.
Okay.
Right. 10 to 15%, from what I understand, is Islamically okay. Right. Depending on different opinions. From what I've been told, legally, that number can go up to 50, 60, 70, 80%. So if you're doing breast cancer research, for example, all of that's going to go towards research. You're going to be paying individuals who are doing research, who are doing testing, and you're paying for wages and wages and wages and wages. So it depends on the industry, right? But I think Islamically speaking, if you're around that 10% mark, inshallah, you're okay. We say 10% just to be safe, right? Now, we think that number is lower because we've got generous individuals and corporates that cover those administration costs. So, for example, the center that we have, it costs us about $5,000 a month to run, right? Rent, Wi-Fi, commercial bins, cleaning supplies, kitchen supplies, blah, blah, blah. So you're talking about 60 grand a year. Now, we've put out campaigns to personal contacts. Hey, we need these expenses to be covered. Are you willing to donate your money to cover that expense?
Mm-hmm.
And alhamdulillah, over the years, whether it's Rego, whether it's diesel, whether it's the center expenses, operations, we get people to cover them. So Shabazz knows if you're going to donate $1,000 a month, and I ask you, Shabazz, you paying for our rent, you allow 300 kids a month to come in school to run school excursions. You allow us to store 20,000 Qur'ans to be distributed through Project Qur'an, blah, 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 blah. You know that $1,000 that you're donating is going towards admin.
Mm-hmm.
So I know a long answer, but that's what happens when these charities are saying 100% donation, 0% admin. They've actually got someone covering admin.
Yes, so I think this is an important point, because whenever my annual review of the charities comes out every Ramadan, one calculation that this year I'll put a very clear caveat in is that you'll see expenses in there, and you cannot take that expense and divide it by how much the beneficiaries receive and then get a percentage, because there's a part of donations that are covering those particular things. So usually, in some instances, that percentage would be a lot lower.
Yep.
But when I just look at the expenses as a ratio of donations, typically the average Muslim charity covers between, say, 10 and maybe 16% or so.
Yep.
But you will take that with a grain of salt because there's people that are offsetting it. I think as well, like if you're familiar with donating to certain charities, you might also notice that when you check out, there will be an option to give a couple % more to cover off the admin fee. Because again, like everything costs money. Even the payments, the hosting of the website, like just the process of facilitating the payment, let alone the execution, requires money. So I think, and like I always tell people that like, it's always talking about the size of the pie versus the slice of the pie. And I find that especially at the bigger you get as a charity, the easier it becomes to shrink the overall cost overheads as a ratio to the thing. So I think those are some of the conversations that I would say, like, if I was homeless or in need or whatever, I would prefer that the pie was big, even if the slice from it was decent, than to have a small pie and 100% of it is there. So I think like that analogy I try to repeat with people because it actually captures, I guess, what we're trying to do, make sustainable institutions and organizations that can do this.
Something for us to consider just on that point. I know we've given it some time, but I think it's important for the community to understand. I want us to go back to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He became the Khalifa after the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. We know that he was a merchant, and we know he made a lot of money. How do we know that? Because there's a lot of ahadith that talk about how much money he gave. So he needed to make to give, but the making wasn't the praiseworthy part, it was the giving. Correct? So when he became the Khalifa, he was now the head of state. Now he had to give that up to work for the sake of Allah. How did he do so? Umar ibn Khattab came in to the office. Where is this guy? He's not here. He's in the marketplace. What's he doing in the marketplace? He's working to provide for his family. Habib, what's going on? We need you. The Ummah needs you. Yeah, but I've got to provide. So Umar gives him a stipend. Gives him half a sheep. He works for a bit. And then now he's back in the marketplace. He's not in his office. We're paying you, mate. What's going on? It's not enough. Once again, he's a merchant. He was a businessman. He was making his own money. Now he's on a stipend. So then his stipend was increased and the sheep was increased. Does that mean he wasn't working for the sake of Allah? No, he was working for the sake of Allah. He took a pay cut from corporate to work for the dawah. And number two, the dawah paid. So I think as we evolve as a community, we need to understand, number one, the dawah can pay. That's why you have Bayt al-Mal. The treasury is there to fulfill those roles, to pay judges, to pay police, to pay so on and so forth, governors and the like. And number two, it doesn't mean if someone's getting paid that they're not working for the sake of Allah. Maybe they dropped 30, 40, 50% corporate to work for the community. And Ismail is a recent example where he used to work in IT, and only last year has he worked for NZF. And he said that before. So, because you need to make a decision. Am I staggering the growth of the organization by doing it voluntarily, even though I'm giving it 24/7, but my scraps, because I got to work? Or does the shura make the call, listen, mate, we're going to give you not as good as what you were on before, but we're not going to give you something measly, just so you can take this charity from where it is to where it's at. We've seen NZF's growth in the last 3 years, mashallah, a couple of years, how it's grown from where it was before to each year. It's just common sense.
And I think like you notice that like as you said, like actions or physical evidence of the fact that organizations that typically excel are typically those organizations that have people that are either working part-time or full-time and are able to dedicate themselves. So that's an interesting point, I guess. Like we did get some specific questions about brothers in need in terms of these issues.
Yep.
So one of the I'm assuming brothers asked. Some people ask, who pays for the volunteer lunches and dinners, the sponsorship of events and clubs. So I think recently you guys sponsored a soccer club. So sometimes when you put a post picture out and you intend something, you're like trying to show, we're sponsoring this organization, etc. Some people see that and be like, hey, did my money go towards that soccer club? I wanted it to go to the homeless people or whatever. So lunches, dinners, sponsorships. Tell me about that.
Good question. So similar to how I explained it in regards to the rent, the administration, operation expenses for the center. When it comes to iftars, when it comes to dinners, when it comes to the Ramadan calendar that I gave you, for example, that costs money to print. But on the side of that, we've got the list of sponsors that contribute to our admin pool, that contribute to our operation pool. So over the years, alhamdulillah, we've been able to develop trust with these donors who say, for example, Dean, we trust you. We're going to give you 10, 15, 20, X amount of grand per year, and you spend that as you see fit. So I get a pool of funds that are unallocated from certain donors and individuals that have trusted us over the years, that have seen the work that we do over the years. Sometimes I'll speak to them and I'll tell them, listen, this is the objective of why I'm doing X, Y, Z. So say, for example, we talk about volunteer retention, we talk about, like we talked about before, 575 volunteers we have on our books. Say 10% are active. That's 57 volunteers that we need or we have on a regular basis that allow us to run our programs. If we were to give each of those volunteers, say 60 volunteers, we were to give them $25 an hour and they were to volunteer 4 hours a week, right? So $100 per volunteer, that's $6,000 a week. That's $300,000 a year. So I'm saving the organization $300,000 a year, not spending it on employees to run the programs that we run, right? So sometimes we tell these sponsors, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "He who doesn't thank the people hasn't thanked Allah." So we would like to thank our volunteers for their hard efforts. Once a quarter, we might do a barbecue, we might have a feed, we might do an iftar. Are you comfortable in allowing your donation or part of your donation to cover X amount of money that we want to allocate towards looking after our volunteers? Number one, to enact the sunnah. Number two, to look after our volunteers and encourage them to do more. And 90% of the time they say, yes, no problem, mate, it makes sense, because they see the work, right? But these conversations I had after years of trust, after seeing the work, after being transparent. So like we discussed before, we've showcased all our financials since inception online, when legally we didn't have to, because the first 5 years we were a small non-for-profit. So this doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? So when people say, Dean, how come you sponsored the Zaki movie? How come you're sponsoring Sunnah Life Academy? How come you're sponsoring the Rehab Project? How come you've got a partnership with the Chalora Wolves? I can sit here and say, number one, because we've got funds that are open to be spent as we see fit, and they fit in line with our strategic partnerships objectives, with the overall objective of unity, blah, 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 blah. And that's why we allocate a portion of those unallocated funds to that. Now, if you donate money to the homeless program and you have that description there, then I'll obviously donate it to the homeless.
That's an important follow-up, but you answered.
Yeah.
Because what people need to realize is that when you're donating to a charity and they specify funds, you want to ensure, and this is good transparency that's coming out, which is that if I'm donating for, say, the bushfire relief, because I went through the website, you'll go on the donation page and you'll see all these boxes with little nice icons explain what you're doing. So I wanted to, for example, donate to the bushfire relief. Then you are taking the responsibility as my agent that I've given you this money for this objective, to fulfill this objective. So I think this has come up a few times as well, that you want to have that trust with the partner, that if you're giving them for a specific objective, then going to that specific objective. So like, for example, in that specification of the objective, then Dean can't take that to sponsor a soccer club or whatever it is. But then if you want to give general donations and just trust the fact that the people running the organization are going to do well by you, then you can do that as well. And again, like if you can't trust the people, you shouldn't be donating to them to begin with. So that's right. So there's some other questions there as well. Another one specifically that is targeted at you in the van. Okay, I'll read it as it comes.
Yeah.
The van is always seen with you only in it, very rarely with others. Is there really a need for a van? How did you buy it? Is it brothers in need only? Or do you use it for personal use as well?
Yeah, good question. So like I mentioned to you before, for example, on the podcast, I was at a shura meeting. So since inception, we do shura. We do it, inshallah, as regular as we can. So when it comes to certain decisions, we make shura about it, right? So for example, when we purchased a van initially, the question was, do we leave the van at head office? Do we leave the van with one of the volunteers? Does it rotate amongst volunteers? So the shura decided that it was efficient to keep it at my place, right? As opposed to leaving it at a central location, and then a volunteer needs to drive from Liverpool to Chalora to Parramatta to feed the homeless and drop it back off to Chalora. They go back to Liverpool, for example. And then whenever there's a program, that van is used for that program. So for example, the homeless outreach program, the volunteers will take the van, right? I've got another car. The volunteers will take the van, load up the vehicle with all the different produce, all the different items, use it for distribution, and then bring it back, and then it stays with myself. In terms of that decision, it was made by the shura at that point in time because it was efficient. How it was purchased, So we ran a campaign at that point in time because back then we didn't have a formal premises. So we thought about what's cheaper at that point in time to run. Should we buy an asset? Should we rent an asset? Should we, like in terms of a property, right? Or, like a property, or should we have a mobile vehicle with some branding on it to get the brand out there, right? And so the decision of the board was at that point in time, let's purchase, a vehicle, and then, brand it the way it's branded, and then inshallah, leave it with yourself.
So we've talked about the van. Another one is you sell dates. So someone said you have been known for selling dates. Is that personal or is that linked to Brothers in Need?
A good question. So my wife and I started a business, Facebook business, if you'd like to call it. This is probably going back, I reckon, as well, maybe about, 5 years ago, give or take. I think we've done it for about 2 Ramadans, if I'm not mistaken, and we stopped it because at the time my wife had given birth, and there was just a lot of labour involved in unpitting the dates, or pitting them, right, taking out the pits and then filling them out and what have you. That was a personal business, and so I think on that note, one of the reasons why, and I think on the agenda we want to talk about Invictus Solutions, the reason why I created my company Invictus Solutions 3 years ago is because the reality is the dawah doesn't pay, right? The dawah doesn't pay corporate. The dawah doesn't pay a Sydney lifestyle. The dawah doesn't allow me at this point in time, it may in the future, doesn't allow me to provide a decent quality of life for my family. And so instead of taking more money from the pool of funds, instead of making that 10% go up to 15, 20%, right? One needs to look at different income streams, right? To bring in an income to fulfill his family's rights. And so Invictus came in, we set it up, and then that's where I, as a registered counsellor, run my counselling sessions. I run workshops in different schools and institutions to help offset taking money from the dawah.
Yes.
And so
I think that's very important, because you could have sat there and been like, okay, every other charity is doing 15%. Let's go to 15%.
Yeah.
But to take a step back and think, okay, what's better for my family and the da'wah, to do that, I think is actually pretty good. And I think, like, just because someone's in like community organizations, it doesn't mean that they should be expecting to live like a very austere life and whatnot. So I think that's pretty good.
And we saw like different examples, of different scholars of Islam that were affluent, right? They had businesses, they had different ways to generate income while they sought knowledge, right? And so it's not a foreign example. Right? We see lots of mashayikh in this day and age that also have like a halal side hustle that bring in an income for them to be able to do da'wah. And so I don't think we should look at it as, oh, brother, why are you involved in so many things for? Brother, you blah, 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 blah. It's a matter of, okay, let me dissect it, try and understand why. I may not agree, which is fine. That person may not agree. They might say, look, actually, I'd rather you take a full-time wage and dedicate 150% to the da'wah instead of dedicating 50% to the da'wah and 50% to your business, perhaps, right? And it's a valid call, no problem. So everyone will have their own way of determining what's the best course. I think it's important for us to try and understand why, ask those questions. And if, that person is open to having a conversation and understanding why you take X amount %, why you set up your own business, why you drive the van, why whatever, I think most times you'll actually get an answer for your question, as opposed to having negative, assumptions, which is against Islam anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not doing the right thing by assuming negatively about your brother in Islam. You should have husnul dhan and have good thoughts.
And if, like, we're not saying to just have good thoughts and just go with whatever. We're obviously saying that, okay, you have good assumptions of people. You see something, and for whatever reason in your heart, you have like a doubt about this person's credibility or what they're doing with the funds or whatever. it's you should go and approach them in a private setting or in a manner that's befitting of giving people advice.
Yep.
And asking. I think that's the important part. So not saying you did 1, 2, 3, but say something like, I've noticed these two things, and is there a link between them? Like we're asking about the date, or we're asking about the van, and whatnot. So I think you might have answered this, so we might skim over this question fast. So admin costs include the HR. What type of like salary packages are you and your staff on? I'm not asking for numbers.
Yep.
How do they compare to government or corporate roles?
Yeah. So look, I'm happy to share that information because it's public information anyway. So usually, once again, you jump on the AC&C. If you're a registered charity, you must put your financials. If you're a medium-sized charity, now they changed the rule. So 500 grand and over, you need to, by law, upload those financial documents, right? So the information is already publicly available. You just need to look for it. My wage, from Brothers in Need, doing shura, doing consultation, speaking to other charities, other mosques, speaking to our shura, seeing what the average wage is, right? I earn 2,600 a fortnight, so 1,300 a week, right? So when you look at different corporate wages, it's below the corporate benchmark, right? So if you jump on Seek, you type in the average for a CEO midterm, 5 to 8 years, 5 to 9 years, you'll see that I should be sitting up on here and I'm sitting on here. The board is ever telling me, Dean, take more. It's your right. We want Brothers in It to not just be in New South Wales and Queensland and Melbourne. We want it to have a presence in every state. We don't want you to work in Invictus. We want to pay you. These are the conversations minuted in the board meeting.
Because I think, like, again, it's the opportunity for us. The board will say, okay, if we gave this guy a few more $100 a week, the outputs would be disproportionate. And I think, and again, like, I didn't, just for the record, I didn't expect Dean to actually give specific numbers.
Yep.
But the fact that you did is again an evidence of people shouldn't assume particular things. About people's situation. Like because have you, maybe, I'm not sure if you've heard this or not, but are there some Muslim charity CEOs that are above that? And I mean, like, significantly above that. We're talking in terms of magnitude.
Yep. So when I was doing the shorter process, when I was jumping online, when I was speaking to other individuals that are involved in certain organizations, you're looking at my role, right, which is a fluffy role. I don't like these, labels, MD, CEO, rah. You're looking at 2.5, 3 grand plus a week. A week.
A week.
A week.
You gave it a fortnight.
I gave it a fortnight. Yeah. Right. So you're looking at 150 plus grand a year. That's like, I don't want to mention names of charities that I know are on that, and that's okay, right? If you've got an office in every state and you're earning 150 grand a year, and the shorter has made that decision, you're not exploiting the system. You're not going against Islamic frameworks. You're not going against a legal framework, right? You're going against the norm, right? Inshallah khair, no problem, right? Where it becomes a problem is if you're taking 200, 220, 250 grand a year.
I've heard,
right? 300 flights,
healthy.
Everywhere, right? You're talking perks and bonuses. This is problematic. Now, I'm not saying
the half sheep or one sheep.
Yes, this is the flock. Yeah. So look, maybe once again, I don't want to fall in the trap of assuming. So if that knowledge comes to you, go ahead and have a chat with that CEO, with those CEOs. If they're forthcoming and they give you an answer, you make that informed decision. Do I not? Should I agree? Should I not? Do I want to stop giving to them, or do I want to continue? That income, is it generating 10, 20, 50 fold? Is it not? You can go along your own process and determine if you're happy with that or not, right? But once again, the process that we embarked on, and by the way, I didn't get that wage initially, right? So I wasn't working. So I was working for the cause 24/7, And for the first 3.5 years, I didn't take a wage from the organization at all. And that's evident on the books, right? You can jump on ACC website. Year 4, year 5, year 6, 2 days a week. The year after, 3 days a week. The year after that, 4 days a week. So even then, right, I was very mindful of how much money to take from the org. Like for me, if I look at it from a dollars and cents perspective, put me on 5 days a week. Seek says I should be on 120 to 150 grand a year. Put me on that, right? I'm on 67,000 a year, 69, 70, 70,000. So I'm not saying the wrong thing, right? But that's why, once again, for me personally, I've set up Invictus to be able to offset that. Because in this country, you're going to need 90, 100, 150,000 perhaps to survive, depending on how many children, the quality of life that you have, expenses, if you're looking after family, whatever the case is, depending on your circumstances. I personally, even though it's not haram, it's okay, I want to offset that at this point in time through my company. And that's my way of giving back to the dawah. So instead of charging the dawah X amount of dollars, I want to offset that through my services that I offer. So that's the whole context as to why I do what I do. And people may still not agree. And like we said before, that's perfectly fine. But you can ask as many questions as you want, and I'll give you the answers. We might agree, we might disagree. We're still brothers at the end of the day, like Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma. They both disagreed on a lot of different issues, but they still loved each other for the sake of Allah. And that's fine.
Yeah, and again, like I said, like being able to talk directly to the person, ask without assuming, and all these other aspects is what we're trying to do.
Number one, what's one thing that you remember? What's one controversy you felt like you were a part of? Felt like you were potentially not, maybe not exactly, you weren't sure. I guess the comeback at you was so fierce that you weren't sure about your own position. But after some years, you found maybe that's, you did take the right position. What's one thing that you really feel like you really grew in that way from?
I think when we were feeding members of the homeless community and the non-Muslims, and ISIS was on the rise, Islam, Muslims, kuffar, hate non-Muslims, how dare you use sadaqah to feed a kafir. People were smashing us hectic. People were like, Dean, you're a kafir sympathizer, you're a kafir, you're feeding non-Muslims, you're spending sadaqah for non-Muslims. I started doubting myself. I started thinking, man, there's a hadith about giving animals water, subhanAllah, like what, I can't give a non-Muslim water? So then I started asking the Shaykh, am I doing something wrong here? Am I allowed to feed non-Muslims with sadaqah? Like if people are donating money specifically for me to feed a non-Muslim person, can I use that money to feed a non-Muslim? They've told me use it to feed a non-Muslim or whatever. They're like, Dean, brother, you keep going. People are going to talk smack. People are going to hate. People are going to whatever. Part of the business. Keep going. Because there was a period of time, man, where like I was telling Bizri, and I was like, bro, I'm out of this. I'm done. Shut and shop. Shut and brothers in need, or I'm going to give it to someone else to run. Even till today, the boys know if someone tells me, Dean, I'll do a better job than you, wahiyat Allah, I'll give it to them. I have no problem in saying, because I'm the one that co-founded it, or because I'm the MD, it should be me. I don't believe in I should die with this organization. If someone comes forward that wants to give their time up, paid, they'll do a better job, they'll take brothers in need above and beyond, there you go, buddy. Take it. Right? So for me, I have no problem in a second. Yeah, take it. Right? And I was at that point, probably 2017 or something, I don't know, man, 2016 perhaps, where I was like, I'm done. Right, sack the community, bro. They're good for nothing. But then you do shorter. Once again, shorter is important for me, man. So I was speaking to you, Bizri. I was speaking to Sheikh Abu Bakr Zawaz. I was speaking to Ismail. I was speaking to everyone. What do you think?
I think that's very important. Like we were talking about it in the room as well beforehand, that you need anchors. You need people that you go back to. You consult. You make shorter with them. You don't see yourself as the final arbitrator in all these. You actually you're not in an echo chamber. These are the ways that you need to ensure that you're maintaining the right path. I think also the issue was, we'll maybe talk about this as well, burnout. if when you sign up for that job and it's like 70 grand, in the job description doesn't say you're gonna get smashed. That part doesn't get compensated for with a commission structure or something like that.
That's why Ismail says you're in a boxing ring. We think boxing ring because we're the one fighting. No, we're the one who's getting smashed. That's the reality. Ismail gets smashed, bro. I'm telling you, Ismail gets smashed. Right? Obviously, I don't know. You heard what had happened internally with them last year.
I know about that. Yeah.
He got smashed, mate. This guy, like, his sheikh was gonna tell him sack, and he's like, Sheikh Tawfiq is like, I'm not gonna give you an easy way out. No, mate, you gotta go through X, Y, Z, recoup, go out, cop it on the chin. People are gonna ask you tough questions. You're gonna go through your investigations. That's part of the business, bro. Like, it's not like, oh, mashallah, 10 years, it's so beautiful. Brother, there's a lot of rubbish that we need to go through to make it look beautiful. Your job is to make us look beautiful.
Just like I guess like just like on a personal level, the way that we show our personal life on social media is very different to sometimes behind the scenes.
Yeah.
When they see pictures of you with the van,
Yeah.
or feeding the homeless, etc., they're not seeing all the other stuff. They're not seeing all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Besides financial trust, there's Islamic trust. How can people trust brothers in need from an Islamic perspective? Some people may sort of criticize some particular ways that you do operations. Like you mentioned that sometimes you may work in a way where brothers and sisters are working together. Some people may not be fine with that. But like, what anchors do you have from an Islamic perspective?
Yeah.
Who's in the brains trust from a Sharia perspective?
Yeah. So we've got different advisory boards, right? So one of them is a Sharia advisory board. It's informal, right? Just as these advisory boards would be, right? So it's nothing formal where you'll find it on our website or in our constitution. But people that we bounce Islamic concepts, questions off, like we discussed before, you've got your Sheikh Abu Bakr Zod, your Sheikh Nasim Abdi, Sheikh Bilal Danoon, Sheikh Shadi, Sheikh Abu Ishaq, Sheikh Wael Ibrahim. You got people that are in the space that are not coming from an Islamically, from an Islamic Sharia perspective, but work in the Islamic space like Ismail Davids, Mazen Fahmi, people of that caliber that work in the dawah, like Al Firdaus, for example. You got Muslim males and females working together, right? But say with NZF, you got different offices around the country, but males and females working together. You've got team meetings, so on and so forth. So we asked people of knowledge, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. So we're looking for the Islamic-based knowledge, and we're also looking for it in a pragmatic way. How does it work in similar organizations that do what we do?
So let's just pose an example. Say there's an issue, say, I don't know, zakat related, and you're at crossroads as to, do I go down this view or this view? The mashayikh you've consulted, for example, may give you the same view. Sometimes they may give you differing views. What do you do then?
Yeah, good question. So, example, come across a fatwa, right? And I've dissected it with a few mashayikh in terms of zakat and how it can be used. There's a fatwa available where it comes to, can we use zakat money for da'wah, for education, advancing education, schools, blah, blah, blah. The way I understood it and the way it was relayed to me is that whatever category it fits under, jihad fi sabilillah, it's okay to use zakat, and the question and the fatwa was around the Australian context, can be used for advancing education, right? And so if there's a cause like, for argument's sake, Al Firdaus, Sunnah Life Academy, any educational entity that propagates Islam, right, then they are eligible for zakat.
Okay.
So we might use a portion of our zakat, right, to advance their cause.
Okay. So you, let's just say you've got that now.
Yep.
Now you go to Sheikh Abu Bakr Zod or the mashayikh that you mentioned.
Yep.
What happens then?
If they give me a spectrum of answers, right, once again, depending, of course, doing shura, right, at the end of it. So the concept of shura, you ask for their opinions, and then someone has to make that decision. The Amir has to make that decision, or someone has to make a decision, right? So we do the shura with the Mashayikh. They give me a range of different answers, starting from here and ending here, right? We will come up, depending on the context, with a solution within those answers. We won't go out. We won't go out.
Okay.
So if the chef says yes, yes, no, 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 yes, they give evidences as to why, right? Evidence, proof, why it's okay. And depending on the context, we'll bounce off then a specific scenario to those mashayikh. So this is what we're thinking of doing. Yay, nay. Some will say yay, some will say nay. We will then, depending on the organization, the objective, the purpose at that point in time, make a decision accordingly.
Right.
Some might still say, brother, some mashayikh said no. And we might say, in some decisions, some mashayikh said yes, right? And so this organization was going to go down under. They needed support to advance Islam, to advance religion through education. And this is why we came to the decision that we came to. It's for a period of 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. It's one-off, it's long-term, whatever. So we take different factors into consideration before going ahead with the final verdict. And then we trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the decision process. It's about the process. It's not about the outcome. It's about that process that we took. And then we will have a conversation and say, are we comfortable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We consulted X, Y, Z chefs, right? We gave them context. We gave them an example. They said it's okay.
So I think that's very important. Because saying like a lot of people that say follow the podcast, etc., maybe then being like, okay, the fi sabilillah category being interpreted in the modern context like this, sort of may go counter to a lot of the classical understandings, etc. And that's why I always say to everyone, like, go and talk to the people when you're going to give them your zakat. The zakat, again, is a pillar of Islam.
Yep.
If you hold particular views and where it should go, where it shouldn't go, then you need to sort of at least engage the different charity organizations on their positions of that. Like a related question: how do you determine someone's eligible for zakat?
Yep.
For example, like maybe one of the questions, like a clear question would be, do you ever give zakat to non-Muslims?
No.
Do you give zakat to, like, how do you then, so let's put that to the side.
Yep.
So you're using sadaqah for that. Do you use zakat with your admin fees?
No. Personally, at this point in time, it might change in the future.
Okay.
But at the moment, our zakat pool, we do not take a percentage of it as admin or that category. That's correct. So we don't take it at this point in time. Just to be clear, we might in the future. Our zakat pool isn't much anyway. So I think if we collected 750 grand last year, as of that spreadsheet, just gone off the top of my head, 75 to 100 grand was zakat.
Okay, so about a 10th.
The rest was sadaqah, right? So we don't collect much zakat, right? So the pool for us is smaller. We don't think we need to take a percentage out of it for admin, and we will use that in zakat-related categories. Now, say, for example, if I'm dealing with a client, we don't do much case management, to be honest with you. Usually we refer to NZF because they do predominantly case management. If we were to deal with an emergency that needed support, it's a weekend, NZF hasn't picked up, for example, right? Because they're humans, they need to rest, they need to sleep, or whatever the case is. And we need to act fast.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a application form that we go through, right? We ask for supporting documentation, right? We're not private investigators, so we're not going to cross-reference every piece of information, but we're going to do our due diligence.
Okay.
So we're going to ask them, provide us with your rental ledger, provide us with your bank statement, provide us with your bills, provide me with XYZ, fill out the application form. At the end of it, it's got a statement that you know that this pool of funds is coming from zakat. You're comfortable in standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowing that we gave you from the zakat pool, that you're eligible, and sign. then we will, in terms of case management, use that process to, in a very condensed explanation, administer X amount of zakat till the non-for-profit opens up on the weekday or refer them onwards.
Okay, so it's sort of like a band-aid until the real solution comes in.
That's right. Just because, once again, we don't collect much, we don't allocate much zakat per client. So NZF, mashallah, that collected 5.5 mil or whatever they collected last year, they might allocate a lot more to a case, right? They might give them, pay their rental arrears, they might buy them a car, depending on the circumstance. They've got more money to allocate per client, depending on their circumstances, if they're terminally ill, if they're a single mom, if they're homeless, whatever the case is. So every organization will kind of have its own process and system. I think it's important that if you're going to distribute zakat, you've got a system that is Islamically compliant, and then also you've done shura and you've asked other services in your context how they distribute it, and then just that concept.
So predominantly, I guess, like, you've got the 8 categories. Predominantly, you're focusing on the first 2 where people are in dire need. They're sort of struggling with they're living like in debt, or they aren't covering their bills, they don't have things. So it's predominantly those 2.
That's right.
Okay, cool. The other one about zakat, last one on zakat, and we'll move on, is how long do you sit on money? So zakat isn't fulfilled until the recipient receives it.
Yep.
If I gave you zakat now,
Yep.
how many months or time period would it take for that money to fall into the hand of someone that needs it?
Yep. So, pardon me, put it this way. Someone donated about 52 grand worth of zakat to me a couple of months ago. Right? That's just the one person along Abadik. Doesn't happen all the time, but that takes precedence and priority in terms of its disbursement. So we had already allocated, just to be safe, say within the first week, we had distributed about 32 grand of it in the first week out of 52. So we had 5 here, 10 here, 5 here. So there are some organizations that we work with that needed zakat money.
Okay.
So we've got partnerships also. Out of those partnerships, some of those, not all of them, are eligible for zakat, but there are some that have clients, have beneficiaries that are eligible for zakat. So sometimes we act as a intermediary,
like a feeder,
as a feeder to some smaller organizations that have a need for it. So we'll call them up. Hey, we've been given X amount of money. Do you have a need for it? Yep, I've got a need. I've got 3 families. I've got a family of 9, blah, blah, blah. They're zakat eligible. I've qualified them. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So we 10, 2, and then the rest of it was dispersed not long after. So for us, zakat is a priority. So as fast as we can get rid of zakat, we get rid of it. Because like you said, right, once it's in the beneficiary's hands, the amount is off my chest. With other surplus funds, if we've been given funds that have no description, that are unallocated, right, then we'll allocate it accordingly, right? So, some services, some businesses will donate a lump sum. So they'll give us 10, 20, 25 grand a year. We'll say, okay, you've given it to us to spend it as we will. We're going to drip feed it over the next 3, 6, 9 months on XYZ expense. They're the unallocated funds, the general funds, right? You've got some other funds that are project specific. Project specific funds, once again, they're also a priority. So we try and distribute them as fast as possible.
Okay.
Obviously, we're not just going to go ahead to spend for the sake of spending.
So I think it's like about balancing between achieving the objectives of getting it out fast, but at the same time maintaining procedure so that you're not just handing it out nilly-willy.
Yeah.
Last question on Brothers in Need would be, what are the future plans? How do you expand? What are the next challenges? What are the next growth horizons that you're planning?
So we're 8 years in, right? So I've got a couple more years. It'll be 10 years in operation, inshallah. For us, what I envisage, inshallah, in a very summarized fashion, we'd like to have our own infrastructure, right? So at the moment, we share the current place that we run out of with 3 other non-for-profits at a minimum. So Project Quran, Brothers in Need, and the Rehabilitation Project, at the very least, run very regularly and weekly in our centre. For us, we wanted to trial out, we talk about unity, we talk about service partnerships and how we support others. We wanted to trial that out in a premises. So it doesn't make sense to pay 3 sets of rents, 3 electricity bills, 3 Wi-Fis. So we wanted to trial something out in a place. Alhamdulillah, we've outgrown that place. And so post, 10 years, we want to do an event. We want to be able to purchase our own place, something big, where we can now expand that from 3 to 5, 7, 10 different services, build a purpose place facility. It's like a beehive that allows for different services to have like an end-to-end service for the community. We're still not going to fulfill all the needs for it, right? Although, we talk about the youth and we don't have enough places for them. We talk about women and we don't have enough places for them. We talk about, organizations and they don't have a place, to use. We talk about conference room and we want to have a place where we are able to open our doors for other services to run their services to the community, right? That will help feed into our overall objective and plan and purpose, which is unity, which is working with one another. It will allow us to be able to run our programs on a mass level. For the programs that we currently run, it will allow us to do so more comfortable. Because at the moment, the youth centre that we have, the youth are on top of each other playing table tennis and air hockey and foosball and arcade machines. So having a dedicated space for that, warehousing space for the non-perishables, office space for the future employees as we grow.
So basically like a hub, key part of the infrastructure that we need to achieve all those objectives. It's a good segue into the next section of the conversation, which is the community's development. So you support basically, I wouldn't say every community, but many community projects. But some people see this as the potential weakness.
Yep.
They sort of say that if you support one charity or 2, at least we know that you're focused on them. We know that you're not just endorsing anything that comes your way.
Yep.
So do you think that putting your face on a lot of initiatives dilutes the value of your testimony or you supporting organizations?
Yeah. So I know you shared with me some information. You've done a poll, right? And the more charities someone was associated to, the less reputable, if you'd like to say, they are. I think I'd challenge that. We can give many relevant examples of, mashaykhs that go to different masajid and give different talks. They go around from city to city. We're going to talk about auctioneers that support different fundraisers. They go around from city to city, interstate, that support good causes. We're going to talk about a lot of influential individuals that also do the same, right? Influential speakers that go out and support this fundraiser and donate to this fundraiser, like we saw with Turkey, Syria, Lebanon. How many of the same mashayikh were at 3, 4, 5 different fundraisers? So last week you told me to donate to this charity, but the next week you told me to donate to this charity, but then the next week you told me to donate to this charity, but then on the minbar you told me to donate to this charity. Brother, which charity? I'm confused. No, actually, don't look at it as, this guy is just, has no impact, he's just jumping at every opportunity that comes. No, this person is being used by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do khair.
Right.
And that's how I would look at it is, do I sit here and just focus on one charity and hope that they give me an opportunity to do khair and miss out on countless opportunities to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or do I take the opportunities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends me and allows me to diversify? When Project Quran asked me for support, when the rehabilitation project asked me for support, when Sadaqah asked me for support for our local and international, global Muslim brothers and sisters, do I jump at these opportunities after doing my due diligence? So you got to do your due diligence.
You're not rubber stamping everything, yeah?
No.
You obviously...
You do your due diligence. So if I'm looking at transparency, I'm automatically jumping on the AC&C. I'm seeing if they're tax deductible, if their finances are up to date, right? I'm doing shorter. I'm asking, right? Before I go ahead and jump on a project. Sometimes I might get it wrong. I'm human. But at least I've gone through a process. And so for me...
And I think that's the point, is we're just a different school of thought in the sense that you can maximize your output either by being highly focused or by diversifying.
Yeah.
And there's just different approaches to that, I guess.
Most definitely. And look, in my opinion anyway, if it falls with the overall objective of Islam, right, which is unity, which is working with one another, working with your counterparts, right, for the end goal, then inshallah, this is a noble cause, right? Because McDonald's doesn't provide every service underneath the sun. Woolworths doesn't provide every service under the sun. Bunnings doesn't provide every service under the sun. But in the ecosystem of businesses, they come together collectively and they provide services for the economy, right? So I think similarly with the non-for-profits, right, we also need to start adopting that mindset that this individual or this charity or this mosque, right, needs to support one another to achieve that ultimate objective. And don't think of yourself as an objective. You're just part of that objective.
Yeah. So I guess like another sort of tip people have is that because you have like a relatively open door policy, some people say you work with non-traditional individuals, so they basically you working or taking photos with what would be known as known feminists in the community. How do you balance between working with others and drawing some lines in the sand where you say, okay, this I don't touch this, for example? Just like how do you balance between the two?
So look, I think once again it's important to have a conversation with the individual and ask them a question. So when you told me that question before the podcast, the word known feminist was there. Now that's relative. Is it known to me that particular individual, which we won't name, is a known one? For me, who doesn't have social media on my phone, who misses a lot, who only uses it on their laptop, who posts and jump off, right? Who doesn't see a lot, it's not known to me, right? I just see an individual from the conversations that I've had with that individual, that they are an active person trying to do their part. I'll give another example. Mufti Mink was invited, I think, in the UAE to an iftar with, at that time, a known Zionist. Now, a photo was taken of the Mufti, shaking hands and sitting on the same table as this individual. So then there was a monster backlash that went out against the Mufti. How did the Mufti go to this mixed event, multi-faith, interfaith, whatever, Zionist? This guy's a sellout. He's turning his back on Palestine. Did you ask the Mufti? No, you didn't ask the Mufti. Now, the Mufti Mink came out and done a video apologizing, letting the audience know he didn't know who that individual was. He didn't control the seating. He didn't know who that individual was. He just thought that person was someone from the Jewish community or the kippah. Didn't know anything of it. So before you jump the gun because someone who got paid to take a photo took a photo of a particular individual alongside another individual, and then you, in your mind, right, there's a cognitive distortion there. You've just decided to make up your own narrative. Ask a question. Right. Is that person endorsing that person? Is that person even aware of that person's stance on X, Y, Z?
Yeah, because to be honest, like I maybe before that happening, like yourself, like I took a break from social media, so it just declutters everything in your head, and you may not be following every single conversation. So I think like if, for example, there's a concerned brother or sister that thinks, okay, you're hanging out with the wrong crew or whatever, then just reach out to yourself. And just advise. Like
100%. Yeah. We're all about the nasiha, right? That's why we do shorter, because we won't get it right all the time, right? And so anybody that has sent an anonymous message to you or whatever the case is, like, reach out to me, right? I had this other individual, I don't want to get too much into it, but same thing on social media, very known brother to you and I, right? And came out on social media, brother, why do you feed kuffar? You are kafir, you are I don't know what, blah, 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 blah. Right? I hadn't mentioned brother's name, mentioned my name, whatever. Someone sent it to me, Tom Dean, what is going on here? This guy, someone needs to stop him. I said, don't worry, it's all good, relax. I asked for his number from a individual that I know. Can you please send me so-and-so's number? I called him up, Assalamu alaikum, brother. It's Dean. Assalam. He thinks I'm going to get confrontational. He's obviously done the post about me recently. I said, inshallah, you will. I'd like to catch up with you for a coffee if you're free. I don't have time. I'm busy. I was like, khair inshallah. It just came to my attention that there was a post that was put up by your profile in regards to XYZ. I just wanted to understand, have you joined us on a program before? No. Do you know the programs that we run? I know about it. How do you know about it? It's through social media. Okay. Do you know anything else outside of that? No. So I said, I'd love to sit down with you, have a bite to eat, have a coffee, and just explain to you, or have you join us on a program to understand what it is exactly that we do. Then you can make an informed decision if we're doing X, Y, Z. So after I had that conversation with him, we caught up at a later date, right? And now he'll call me once every 2-3 months. Hey, bro, salam alaikum. There's this XYZ opportunity. Do you want to get behind it, or do you want to 1, 2, 3? So just having that conversation, even though I didn't need to make that first point of contact, right? Call me up.
That's the point. Like, I think I had a very similar experience where someone said something, I think, directly to me or about me, but it was clearly about me. So then I got the person's number, or I inboxed them and I said, "What's your phone number?" That's the only question I asked.
Yeah.
And we jumped on a phone call, and this is a very important lesson I know. If the person hesitates to take the conversation away from the audience. So if it's in a group page and it's sort of thriving off people commenting and liking and all this other stuff and like stirring, then you know that it's not a sincere conversation.
Yeah.
If you take it privately and you say to the brother, give me your phone number, let's catch up for coffee or whatever, then you know that it's a bit more it's a bit more genuine.
Yeah.
So there's that. And I think I always find it ironic that sometimes people have literally hours to sit there and write and to respond, but you offer them a fraction of the time to catch up for a half an hour coffee or something, and magically they're not available.
Yep.
So that's again going back to our intentions, rectifying our inner selves, working on our manners, our dealings with others. I think this is important. And I think, as I said, like if you think that myself or anyone really, yourself, are associated with the wrong people, with platforming the wrong people, with taking photos with the wrong people, then go and approach the person and see, I guess, what they have to say. Another thing is, so you mentioned Project Quran. You mentioned like you worked with a lot of programs. Tell us a bit about Invictus. Like you've worked with community. You talked about how it's like a revenue stream to sort of offset what you need, I guess, as a family, etc. Being so intimately involved in the community, what would you say are probably like the 1 or 2 biggest changes you've seen in the last 5 or 10 years in your time? They can be positive or they could be negative.
Yeah. So this was in regards to Invictus or just my general experience?
A general experience.
Yeah.
Because Invictus, I guess, is a foot in the door in many instances.
Yeah. Look, I think the community is maturing, right? I think there's elements of community that are coming in that aren't mature, but I think because they're on their own journey, they're kind of like entry level. So you and I may have been on the Deen loosely used for the last 8, 10, 12 years, but some of these people are just fresh in. So the conversations that we've been having every year for the last 8 years, now this is year 1 for them, right? So sometimes you're gonna continuously have these conversations with new people that are coming in, right?
Right. Yep.
So I think, the cohort that we've been dealing with for the last 8 years, they've matured. The ones that we know, the ones that we engage with, the ones that have conversations, they've matured. So I think overall the community that I deal with on a regular basis over that span of time has matured in a lot of things. The conversation about local versus global, diversifying, not just putting all of your donations in one basket, understanding why we do things. It's a breath of fresh air to see those conversations evolve, right? So that's been a good sign. In terms of my work with Invictus, like it's relatively like the newer project that I've been involved in for the last 3 years. Once again, the context was to generate a halal income for my family, but also through my work with Brothers in Need, working in community, naturally people come to you, talking to you about their problems. So naturally I was an accidental counsellor. So I didn't feel like at that point in time I was qualified to support them through their journey. And so that's why I decided to go down to TAFE, do a diploma in counselling, register with the ACA, which is a peak regulatory body for counsellors and psychotherapists. And then from there, provide those services to the community. So there's been a conversation, maybe the last 12 months, it's been okay. But before that, the first 2 years of Invictus, people are like, brother, you're a counselor. You went to TAFE. How dare you? You should go to uni, become a psychologist, right? What do you mean you're helping people with their mental health issues?
Because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you.
Yeah, right. So when you sit down, you explain the full context that, number one, there's a need. Number one, you need to look at the context. Number two, you need to know your lane. So there are things, clients that come to me where they're, like I say, above my pay bracket. Their traumas might be complex. I may not have enough knowledge in a particular domain. And so that's where I refer. So naturally, I work with a lot of charities in Brothers in Need. Naturally, I do the same with other professionals in Invictus. So if I don't know how to deal with something, I'll refer them. If it's individual counselling, marital counselling, family counselling, psychologist, right, psychiatrist, I have referral pathways where I refer. So if I'm in my lane, if I'm registered with a peak body, right, for counsellors, and I've got to do ongoing professional development, I've got to do regular supervision hours with another trained professional, then in terms of the legal framework, I'm ticking the boxes there. Islamically, right, if I'm dealing with someone that is outside of my realm of expertise and knowledge, I refer. Then I've done the right thing Islamically, I've done the right thing legally and ethically. I'm in the clear. So you can have your own preconceived notions about what should happen, what shouldn't happen. But as long as we're doing the right thing right, inshallah, then by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by the frameworks that be, then I think, inshallah, we're on the right path, right?
I think that's good. The fact that like you realize maybe something that you wanted to develop further, you developed it to a certain stage that serves maybe a certain percentage of people that come to you.
Yeah.
But then you at least know where the bounds of that is. And I think like a lot of people like will resonate with this, the fact that you've been in the community for this many years, you've done so many things, but you're willing to put up your hand and say, okay, I don't know this issue, and I'm just going to pass you over to someone else. And I think if more people did that, we would have less issues, I think.
Look, it's not good for the pocket. That's why a lot of people may not do that. Although when you understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know that He's a provider, right? You know that your risk has been already allocated to you. You want to do the right thing, right? Because the risk will come regardless if you do blah, 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 blah. So when you understand, I think, that concept, there's been times where I've referred plenty of clients on to other professionals, right? I'm like, okay, well, this is not good for my pocket this week. SubhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send me a contract, will send me something through a school, a workshop, or whatever. Like, Allahu Akbar, where did this come from? It's like, maybe it came from because I done the right thing by this vulnerable person, because the vulnerable person will come to you and whatever you say, they will take because they're vulnerable. So you don't want to exploit people's vulnerabilities, right? So that only happens with you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I feel. So by no means am I trying to say that, I'm, not trying to exploit people, but consciously I make that decision. If it's something's within my realm of expertise, great. There's a monster shortage of male Muslim professionals. There's a long waiting list when it comes to Muslim psychologists, right? And I've also got life experience from my jahiliyyah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved me from, where a lot of other professionals don't have that experience, right? So sometimes when I get clients that come from psychologists to see me, I'm like, well, hold up, you've got a psychologist. Why come to see me for? They can really dig deep in your mind. They're like, yeah, but I couldn't build rapport with them. They didn't understand me. They just understood things from a textbook. Oh, mate, yep, this is a symptom that you have. This is what you need to do. Okay, but I'm a human. So I'm not painting all psychologists with a paintbrush, although I think every professional has a skill set. And so just find the right professional, or find a charity that you trust, or find that person that you can associate with. If you're comfortable with them, you've done your due diligence, and you're happy, then go with it.
That's right. I think there's a huge undersupply, especially in certain aspects of the community, which answers the next question. But one question that I got again, like there was bunches of questions, and I've put these together. Is that you've previously spoken about or speaking to people that have addictions with pornography. So we also received a few questions about that. I guess people can go to maybe some of the other videos that you've already discussed this with.
Yep.
But I'll ask you the gist of the main question. So it's just been framed in different ways. Basically, what's the best way to remain in recovery? Why is relapse like common? And like, what's the long-term treatment process for this particular issue?
Very
So they're sort of saying that perhaps that they've tried things. It works for maybe weeks or something like that. I don't know.
Yep.
But from a long-term perspective, they find themselves coming back.
Yep. Look, it's a multifaceted approach that needs to be taken, right? And there's no one answer that fits all. I've been doing like a lot of reading in the last couple of days about same-sex attraction. And so that person that was writing the different blogs that I was reading and articles, they were saying that there's no one solution that fits all. And the same with any other individual that comes through your doors. My friend calls it the Dawa medicinal approach. So just like, you know, you'd go to your GP, the GP might see 60 clients a day. He's not going to give the same person the same prescription, right? Every single person that comes in, same prescription. You sit down, understand the different factors that are in place, the past, their experiences, different traumas, and then tailor the right solution for them. What I would say is,
what are like some of the like common tools? So like, let's say that I don't know. Every time I'm going to the GP, they just give me Panadol.
Yep.
So what's the Panadol?
Yep.
The Paracetamol. What are the common? What's in your toolkit? I guess.
So look, just like I'll frame it in another way. If someone wants help with marketing, with a website, with a social media content creation, and they came in to your door, what would you suggest? What would you tell them? You'd tell them, look, we've got trained professionals, specialists, people with experience, people with qualifications that can tailor work to your needs, right? So, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. You are the professionals when it comes to pixels, videos, blah, 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 right? So, seek help from a professional because what you've been doing at this point in time isn't working. So like Einstein would say, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So you've tried something for a day, for a week, for a month, for a year, hasn't worked. Well, maybe the strategies that you're trying aren't working because you're doing the same thing over and over again. So maybe sitting with a professional, right, that has experience from their clients, they might have their own lived experience in the past, they might be able to give you the strategies and tips to help support you. There's no easy way, so it needs constant grit, it needs constant discipline, it needs a disciplined environment, it needs you to be productive. These are just some of the ingredients needed to keep you on the straight and narrow. Like people tell me, Dean, why are you involved in so much? Why are you out till 12 o'clock at night, right? Right? It's why are you out? Why are you involved in all of these projects, right? There's no minute in my calendar that's unoccupied. It's because I understand the importance of being productive and having a good environment. And these two ingredients for me help keep me on the straight and narrow, right? So the Islamic concepts, right? Have a good sohbah, have a good environment, have good people around you, being productive. Obviously, if you're going to be productive doing khair, you're not going to have time for shar, you're not going to have time for things that aren't good, right? And so there are some Islamic concepts and some common sense concepts. If you apply, right, your recovery will be more successful. Now, relapse is a part of that recovery.
Okay.
Relapse is a part of that process. Right? So people do relapse, not because they want to, not that we're encouraging it, but understanding the cycle of addiction. It's an addiction for a reason. We had a Sahabi by the name of Abu Mihjan al-Thaqafi, right? So Abu Mihjan, full-blown alcoholic in the time of the Prophet, alcoholic in the time of Abu Bakr, alcoholic in the time of Umar, right? The Badr of al-Qadisiyah, right? Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, commander of that battle. And this guy, for years upon years upon years, was addicted to alcohol, right? So he was addicted to alcohol, and only then, right, was he, after certain circumstances, after certain periods of time, after, his story, was he able to give up alcohol. The companion that came and asked the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to commit zina, give me a fatwa to commit zina, give me a fatwa to commit adultery. Allahu Akbar. Mate, you got a prophet amongst you. There's revelation that's come down. What's he asking for? Give me a concession. Did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam rebuke him? No, he understood that it's an addiction. So he coached him. He asked him, would you like this for your mother? Would you like this for your aunt? Would you like this for your sister? Right? He took him through a process, even though the companions told him, shh, don't ask this question, brother. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, come close.
Right.
So there's a process.
I think, yeah. So I think, like, with these sort of things, I think it's very hard to sort of give a mass market answer. But I think, like, there's certain principles and guidelines that, again, like, just to repeat, like, having the right company, I think not being lonely by yourself, having time that's occupied, so you don't just have free time, and all these other sort of things in a toolkit. But I think like you said, like, relapse is pretty common, possibly quite normal.
Yeah.
I think as well, like, I think all of us struggle with something. So for some people, it might be waking up to pray. For some people, it might be being charitable, etc.
Yeah.
And it's also just about, like, okay, everyone's on that path, and just chipping away is important. Now, just this last part just focuses more on that counseling part. So you also work, I guess, with Islamic schools, school counselor, mentor. You're quite active with the youth. What do you see some of the key challenges confronting the youth? Like, if I was to say, give me only two, what would your number one be, and what would number two?
Yeah. I think the key issue is a lack of connection. So the youth have a lack of connection with their caregivers, with their parents, with positive role models. And because of that lack of a connection, they're looking to cope. They're looking to regulate those emotions in unproductive, unhealthy ways. Right? So we need more positive role models that can build the connection, right? So one of the mashayikh say, you need to connect before you correct. Connect before you correct, right? So if you don't connect with your constituents, right, and in this case the youth, they're not going to take anything from you. Some of the teachers complain, how come my students aren't listening to me? Habib, you haven't built a connection with them. You haven't laughed with them, shared a meal with them, played handball with them before school, whatever the case is. So you, to them, are a nobody. Because a lot of these students don't even have a connection with their primary caregiver. So you, in the biggest scheme of things, you're no one. You're just a person that's paid to be in here. You might get a promotion somewhere else, and you'll be out of my life in 3 months' time, in a term's time, in a year's time. So why should I even give you time of day?
Invest into that relationship. Yeah.
When you connect, and that can be fast-tracked, right? Okay, now I'm receptive. Now I'm willing to learn. So the teacher is a murabbi. The teacher is someone who invests time, connect, right? And so that's a monster issue. Technology doesn't allow us to connect. Parents don't have time. All the siblings, we don't have time for our younger siblings, whatever the case is.
It's a very atomized world. Like, everyone's sort of like floating around, and I think, like, even like, but I've been reflecting over a lot of, like, parenting things that you read and whatnot. Like, you can't help but want to, like, try to teach your kids everything when they're very young, but you sometimes come to the realization that it's better for you to befriend them, build those nurturing, loving relationships, and those are the investments that you make in those early years, so that when it is right for you to teach them, when their brains are ready to receive, emotionally, etc., they're more likely to be receptive to that. So I think that's very important as well. Like even when I've tried to sort of work with youth, etc., as soon as they find that older brother, in some instances, a lot of them are lacking the father figure, when they can sort of connect with you at a deeper level, they're more likely to be receptive. So, like, you'll be teaching a class and there's people from a certain school that has a bad reputation. The kids don't behave there. Casual teachers hate working there. But the parents like, how can they sit with you and they're actually listening? They're learning.
Yeah.
They're telling me, Mom, I don't do this, etc. It's because, as you said, you need to connect before you correct. So I think that's a good outcome. Now, more specifically, I guess like you've been a little bit involved with Malik Fahad Islamic School, and everyone's sort of looking at the significant changes that have occurred at a leadership level. How would you describe the changes? Are they perceivable? What are you seeing on the ground? I guess.
Yeah. Look, I'm seeing a lot of positive changes. I've only been there for a year, and I'm only there a day a week, right? So I don't see as much as other people would see. But for the day that I am there, on every level, executives, the staff that follow, well-being, counselling team, behaviour management, and the like, we are seeing a change in the right direction. We need to look at the context. We need to look at the 5, 10, 15 years beforehand. Obviously, if you've got a tree that's been planted in and that's growing the wrong way, very hard to really uproot that solid tree and then allow it to grow in another way. So Dr. Zach doesn't have an easy job. Changing yourself, like we said before, is hard. And now I'm trying to change the trajectory of 2,500 students, their parents, their family, their friends, the teachers, executive, the whole direction of 3 campuses and the community. And I'm hoping that it's going to happen with no casualties or it's going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen. There are going to be some people that aren't going to be happy. Like we said before, humans, they love stability. They don't like change, right? We're creatures of habit. So when people see change in the way we operate, do things, and you're saying there's no more detentions, but there's reflection. What do you mean there's no detention, but there's a reflection? So you're telling me that I don't have control in my class? You're telling me that I can't scream and shout? Okay, we bring about evidences, we bring about research, we bring about the prophetic manner. Okay, there's a lot of research to show that connecting before correcting is important and your way hasn't been working. Nope, I can't stay here anymore. I need to leave. I need to go scream at some other kids in another school. So there are pockets of people that aren't jumping up and down about it.
Every change in every rule will have quote unquote winners and losers, or people that benefit from a status quo. When it's changed, it doesn't benefit them anymore. But so I guess in general, you're saying that there's a positive change, but you're sort of also setting an expectation that there's a lot of change to occur, so it's going to take some time. So let's cut Dr. Zach a bit of slack.
I think most definitely. Look, he's been given 5 years. That's a 5-year plan to see the change. I think from revival to distinction, right? So it's going through what it's gone through with the former executive and committee, and now into the next. He's been there for a year now, so I think the next 4 years. From what I'm seeing a lot of good.
Inshallah, we'll have Dr. Zach on here as well one day.
Yeah, inshallah. Yeah.
And we can go into that a little bit more, inshallah.
Inshallah.
I think that we've pretty much covered everything. And I'm quite happy that we have. And again, Jazakallah khair, like for everyone's going to probably be watching this later, but it's like past midnight now. And I really appreciate the fact that you take time out of your busy schedule to have this conversation, and also like the frankness with which we had the conversation. So I think like the key lessons I'd reinforce from this podcast would be, number one is that if you have differences with people, go and talk to them, ask them, investigate, etc. The second thing I'd say is that when it comes to charities, do your research as well. Figure out what are they offering, how are they different, how are they similar, who do they work with, etc. But also be willing to give and support either directly, covering the administration fees if you can, and if you're happy with that. If not, even just the businesses that support you. So go on to the website of Brothers in Need, go look at their social media channels. You'll see the businesses that are Muslim-run businesses. They're paying their zakat, they're paying their sadaqah, they're supporting these organizations. So as a community, the least that we could do is by supporting them as businesses. And I think the more the Muslim economy grows, the more that Muslims support each other, the less we have bad suspicions of each other, etc., the more we can raise the bar and inshallah we can sort of leave a community that our kids grow up into that is a much better community than the one we inherited. Any final words, bro? Any thoughts? Any last words of wisdom?
No, look, I think you summarized it very well, mashallah. Look, I've learned as well over the span of time, those echo chambers of negativity are only ever 1%. Sometimes we might look and say, oh wow, look at all of these anonymous things that have come through. There are a lot. In the bigger scheme of things, a population of 1 million people in Australia, 1 million Muslims, right, give or take, right? How many came through? 5, 10, 20, 50, 100. It's minuscule, but sometimes these individuals are given a voice. So what I do tell the less than the 1%, and like you reiterated, if there is a problem, go out and ask, right? Don't do yourself a disservice and ruin your world, this world and the next, because that's what's going to happen. Number one, the little circle that you have around you, there's going to come a time where they're going to disagree with you on something. And it's happened before. Other charities will say, oh, this individual's talking smack about you, or this business will tell me this individual's talking smack about you. But then over the span of time, he's seen that, okay, hold up, they're doing the exact same thing that they talked about that you were doing back 2-3 years ago. So that in those people's eyes that you were talking bad, you've now looked bad in front of them. So you'll just go around destroying your own self, and then you destroy your akhirah. And then for us, that have had people backbite, we'll come on the day of judgment and we'll take all your hasanat. There's nothing better that we can do and we would like than to take all of those masajid that you've built, all of those orphanages that you've built, all of those food hampers that you've given, and that will be our means to salvation, inshallah. So I think for anyone involved in the space, don't be disheartened by the 1%, right? Focus on the positivity, forget about the negativity. And for anybody else that wants to ask questions, inshallah, ask away. You can find me on socials. You can even add my number on this, publicly available anyway. Be more than happy to have a coffee. I'm a double espresso kind of guy, so
I'm no coffee. So at this time of the day, I'm
thank you for having me.
no,
We'll speak about it.
Alright, bro, we'll end it there. So سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.